Hello, you're listening to Cora, Cambium, and Catastrophe. If you can hear this, it means I'm either out of contact on vacation or, more likely, eaten by a very uncooperative plant. Today's special episode is about how not to disappear in an ancient forest. Tip number 1. Don't trust the trees. They're older than you and maybe more vengeful. This posthumously released pre-recorded podcast episode aired a week after its author, botanist Finn, vanished. His truck was found on a forest road with a flash drive inside containing 47 minutes of silence and a faint tapping at the end. His tracks end at a giant fallen tree, carved with what looked like the QR code of a drunken druid. Now the question, how does a person disappear, leaving behind only a sarcastic farewell and biological evidence that defies the laws of nature? Finn was 28 years old, a botanist squared. Not just a nature lover, he analyzed, cataloged, and turned nature into content. His weekly podcast, Cora, Cambium, and Catastrophe, had a modest but devoted following of fellow geeks. He impassionately told the dramatic life stories of trees, calling squirrels fluffy bioterrorists spreading fungal infections. In his old pickup sat a thermos filled with slow-filter coffee, brewed like the growth of a sequoia. And he deliberately didn't use GPS, claiming nature doesn't tolerate coordinates, it tolerates observation. Finn's fellow rangers considered him a harmless eccentric, someone who spent too much time with trees and too little with people. His latest obsession was strange symbols he had begun finding in the Grove of Titans, a remote sector of Redwood Park. These were no mere scratches or vandalism. They were complex, symmetrical patterns carved into the bark of fallen giants. The carvings are too clean, he explained in his audio log. No evidence of saw or chisel marks. The patterns resembled the tattoos of an alien who had stared at ferns too long. He started sketching them, searching for patterns, comparing them to Celtic knots and cellular growth diagrams. Colleagues dismissed his findings, blaming natural erosion or elaborate mold. But Finn was sure this wasn't nature. It was a language, and he desperately wanted to read it. That morning, he found it, the mother of all patterns, as he called it in his last message. A giant fallen sequoia, its trunk nearly covered in an incredibly intricate spiral ornament. He was euphoric. He called base, his voice trembling with excitement. I found Titan Sector 3. This isn't just a symbol, it's a whole library. I must take samples. Everything here is wrong. Fungi, ash, everything. The dispatcher, used to his quirks, just sighed. Copy that, Finn. No overdoing it, and check in within 2 hours. Finn laughed into the mic. That was the last anyone heard from him. Finn's final transmission was replayed dozens of times, everyone searching for hidden meaning. The center, that's Finn. I'll stay a little longer. There's material here for a PhD dissertation, and maybe even a new religion. The pattern isn't carved. It seems to have grown, and the fungi around it are glowing. Yes, you heard right, glowing. If I don't report in 2 hours, don't call Mom. Just tell her I finally found the tree smarter than me. It probably ate me, over and out. There was no fear in his voice, only pure, childlike scientific curiosity that had outweighed his survival instinct. When Finn didn't check in, a patrol was sent to Titan Sector 3. They found his pickup truck abandoned on an overgrown service road. The doors were unlocked. Inside, no sign of struggle, just the peaceful clutter of a botanist's life. His field bag lay on the passenger seat. The first strange clues emerged, like an eccentric genius's one-way travel kit. First, his notebook, open to a page with a sketch of a new symbol and a margin note. If this is a language, then it's grammatically perfect. Who the hell learned it? Second, a small Ziploc bag with sequoia seeds and a note attached with a paperclip. In case I become compost, plant me here. Third, a flash drive plugged into his laptop. The flash drive became the first real mystery. It contained a single audio file, created on the day of his disappearance. Duration, 47 minutes and 12 seconds. Expecting to hear voice notes or forest sounds, the investigators played the recording and heard silence. Absolute dead silence, not a single rustle. Maybe the recording failed, one ranger guessed. They fast-forwarded almost to the end. At the 47th minute, the silence was broken. A quiet but distinct rhythmic tapping sounded. Tap, 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 like someone knocking finger joints against wood from the inside. The knocking lasted 10 seconds, then the file ended. The search team followed Finn's tracks, which led them straight to a giant fallen sequoia. The tree was colossal, about 100 meters long. Its moss-covered trunk resembled the back of a sleeping prehistoric beast. Almost its entire surface was covered in that very carving, the symbols intertwined, forming a fractal pattern that mesmerized. The air there was still and thick, like inside a cathedral. At the base of the trunk, forming an almost perfect circle, grew mushrooms of a strange pale blue color, unrecorded in any guidebook, emitting a faint cold glow. Even during the day, at the center of the circle on the trunk, lay a pile of fine reddish dust, resembling ash. The forensic scientists and biologists who arrived were confronted with facts contradicting their science. The biologist who took a mushroom sample was stunned. It's luminescent, yes, but its DNA doesn't match any known species on Earth. Either it's an unknown branch of evolution, or someone is actively gardening in another dimension, he whispered. The situation with the ash was even more perplexing. Lab analysis showed it was not wood ash, nor soil, nor human remains. It was an unknown organic substance, which completely decomposed and evaporated within 12 hours after collection. One lab technician joked, "Seems we have a ghost cell in the test tube." Boot prints were Finn's only normal trace. They led from the edge of the grove directly up to the fallen tree. The steps were steady, methodical, the stride of a scientist, not a frightened person. He walked up to the circle of mushrooms, paused, and stopped. After that, the tracks simply ended. On the soft, damp soil, where every step should have left an imprint, there was nothing. No signs of struggle, no footprints of other people, not even a depression, as if he had simply sat down on the ground. The last perfectly clear mark, his left boot print, and then a void, as if he took a step and stepped into another dimension. "I've seen people disappear," said an old ranger tracker, "but I've never seen anyone end like that." The K9 unit arriving the next day added to the mystery. Unlike other cases where dogs whined in fear or lost the trail, here something else happened. Zeus, a German shepherd, and the team's top search dog confidently followed Finn's tracks all the way to their end. Then it did something the handler hadn't seen in 20 years of service. The dog didn't whimper. It wasn't scared. It approached the giant trunk, carefully sniffed the carved pattern, then calmly lay down, resting its head on its paws, looking up at its handler as if to say, "That's it. He's here. Mission complete." No command could make the dog search further. It didn't feel threat. It felt completion. Detective Linda Hayes took over the case. The one always called for the toughest puzzles, a pragmatist to her core. But after a day of reviewing the initial reports, she realized this case shattered all norms. Her notebook filled with first impressions. 1. A missing happy botanist geek, unprone to panic. 2. Clues in the truck. The note about compost, the mysterious flash drive. 3. Evidence at the scene. The disappearing ash, the otherworldly mushrooms. Either an unimaginably elaborate hoax, or not a hoax at all. 4. Dogs unafraid, respectfully stopping their search. Tracks leading to nowhere. She closed her notebook and looked at Finn's photo, a smiling, somewhat goofy guy wearing glasses. "Well, Finn," she whispered to the empty room, "what did you get yourself into?" On the third day, an old man leaning on a Madrona staff came to the sheriff's office. He introduced himself as Elijah Eli Thorne, a former ranger who worked in the park back in the 70s. He told them what he saw in the news, recognized the search area. Eli claimed that during a forest fire in the 70s, he and his partner saw a strange man in the Grove of Titans. He was dressed like a botanist from the 50s. In glasses, the old man said, standing by a burning tree, rapidly sketching something in a notebook, unfazed by the flames. When they shouted, he looked up without fear, then simply stepped into the wall of fire and vanished. At the time, his story was dismissed as stress and smoke hallucination, but Eli was certain. When shown Finn's photo, he shook his head. No, not him, but the gaze, the same gaze of a man who sees what we cannot. A week after Finn disappeared, technicians finally accessed data from Finn's sad little smartwatch found in his truck. Most files were corrupted, but technicians managed to recover the last 15 seconds from the mini-camera Finn used to film his samples. The quality was terrible. The footage was from a first-person perspective. Finn approaches the fallen tree. The camera lowers to a handful of reddish ash in the center of the pattern. The ash was damp, and in it, like a mirror, reflected Finn's face, looking down. He appeared mesmerized, but behind his shoulder, in that same reflection, for a split second, something else emerged. A dark, elongated silhouette, as if standing right behind him. Finn on the recording doesn't notice. He reaches toward the ash, and at that moment, the recording cuts off. The discovery that finally convinced Detective Hayes this was no kidnapping came on the 10th day. A volunteer found Finn's handheld magnifying glass. It wasn't lying on the ground. It was carefully suspended by a spider web from a tree branch at human height. But most strangely, it was positioned at such an angle that looking through it, you didn't see the ground. You saw a fragment of the pattern on the giant sequoia. Not just a fragment. The magnifying glass focused perfectly on a tiny symbol resembling a stylized tree with roots spiraling downward. This didn't look like something dropped in panic. It was an installation, an invitation to look closer, to see correctly. In her office, Detective Hayes stood before a board covered with clues. She methodically crossed out one standard theory after another. Kidnapping. Who kidnaps a person leaving no trace, but then returns to carefully hang their magnifying glass on a spider web? Absurd. Animal attack. Animals leave tracks, blood, torn clothing, and they don't make dogs lie down in respect. Suicide or voluntary disappearance. The guy loved life and his work. He left a compost note, dark humor, not a suicide note. He intended to come back. Every logical thread ended in a dead end. Hayes circled in red marker the words from the lab report. Ghost cell. She didn't know what it meant, but she felt it was closer to the truth than any of her theories. This is not a crime scene. It's a stage, Hayes told her partner, showing the photo of the magnifying glass and seeds. Every clue, not something the killer accidentally left behind, but something the director intentionally placed on camera. That thought completely changed the course of the investigation. They weren't looking for a murderer trying to cover their tracks. They were facing someone or something that wanted to be seen. The flash drive with the silence and tapping, the note about the grammar of tree language, the disappearing ash. It was all part of a performance staged for them. But who was the audience, and who the protagonist, who perhaps simply stepped behind the scenes? Trying to find a pattern, Hayes reviewed archives of all unsolved disappearances in California's national parks over the last 50 years. The picture was strange. Different people disappeared, but in cases with similar impossible details and absence of strange clue traces, the profile always matched one particular type. In 1977, a geologist searching for rare minerals in Death Valley vanished. In the 1980s, an amateur astronomer disappeared near an old observatory. In the 1990s, a caver mapping the Singing Caves was lost. They were not mere tourists. They were seekers, scientists, explorers, enthusiasts, bordering on obsession. People trying not just to view nature, but to hear it and decode its secrets. Finn was the last in this line. One of the rangers, a young guy named Sam,
who initially laughed most at botanist Finn, took his disappearance hard. Official searches were called off after 3 weeks, but on a day off, Sam secretly returned to the Grove of Titans. He felt awkward, but did what he thought was right. From his pocket, he pulled a small bag of sequoia seeds, not Finn's, but his own, bought in a souvenir shop. He dug a small hole at the base of the giant fallen tree and planted them. "Just in case you turned into compost, buddy," he whispered to the empty forest, then quickly slipped away, feeling like a fool. Late that night, Detective Hayes sat in her office. Photos hung on the wall: smiling Finn, the grainy shot of the ash reflection, the suspended magnifying glass, the report on the vanishing organic matter, the DNA chart of the otherworldly mushroom. None of it fit a picture of crime.
It looked like a report of contact that had succeeded. Hayes grabbed a marker and wrote in the center of the board, "Invitation." He wasn't kidnapped, he was called. All the evidence, even the eeriest, wasn't a threat, but a test of curiosity, intelligence, and fearlessness. Finn, with his humor, obsession, and little bag of seeds, passed. Exactly 1 year later, Ranger Sam returned to the Grove of Titans on his day off. He walked to where he planted the seeds, expecting nothing. But what he saw stopped him cold. Near the giant fallen trunk, beside the old complex pattern, there was a new carving. Smaller, but just as cleanly cut. A simple, elegant diagram, vaguely familiar from a school textbook, and below it, a few letters. Experts later confirmed it was the exact chemical formula for photosynthesis, and the letters below formed a single word written in Finn's handwriting. Thank you. That same day, subscribers of the podcast Cora, Cambium, and Catastrophe received a notification about a new episode. It was the posthumous episode Finn had programmed to release exactly 1 year after his disappearance. Finn's voice, cheerful and a bit mocking, sounded through the speakers. "Hi, you're listening to Cora, Cambium, and Catastrophe. If you can hear this, I'm either on vacation without service, or more likely eaten by a very uncooperative plant. Today's special episode is how not to disappear in an ancient forest. Tip number 1, don't trust the trees. They're older than you and maybe more vengeful. Tip number 2, if a tree offers you tea, politely refuse. It's probably compost. But seriously, be curious, not as much as me. Over and out." Officially, the case was closed as a missing person in a remote area, but Hayes and a few who knew the full story saw it differently. Finn wasn't a victim, he was the first to make contact. An ancient, non-human intelligence residing in that grove, communicating through the language of biology and vibrations. It sought a conversation partner and found one in a funny botanist, the only one who took its language seriously, trying to decode its grammar. He didn't die. He transitioned, becoming part of that system, not compost, but a gardener. A year later, Ranger Sam was on night patrol again. Driving past the road to the Grove of Titans, out of pure curiosity, he pulled out a portable spectrum analyzer, a device he bought after Finn's disappearance. He pointed the microphone toward the grove. The airwaves were clear. Sam was about to leave when a faint vibration appeared on the screen. He put on headphones. From them came a quiet, rhythmic knock. Tap, 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 exactly like the tapping on Finn's flash drive. Sam listened for a few seconds. Then another, more complex rhythm appeared, overlapping the first. It was a response. The knocking turned into a dialogue. Finn was never found, but the forest seems to remember him. His disappearance became a legend among the rangers, a cautionary tale with a wry smile. Some say if you listen closely to the silence in the Grove of Titans, you can hear a faint knock. Others say new symbols continue to appear on the trees, growing ever more complex. The official investigation is long archived, but the question remains, was this a tragedy? Or the most extraordinary scientific discovery in human history made by a man who just loved trees very much? The ending remains open, with a bittersweet smile. Maybe Finn didn't disappear.
Maybe he finally found a worthy conversation partner. Thank you for watching.